And then the group by. This one here can be a little bit tricky. Okay, group by is used to aggregate information data. So the word here is aggregate. So in SQL Server and other as well, you have what's called an aggregator. It's a group of functions that is built into the system that you can use to quickly, get some data out of it. It's like common ones are usually like applied to numbers. Like if you want to get the average of a certain column, you will get the maximum number in that sales, right? So you have a million records in there, a column of your sales, give me the largest sale amount in there. So you can use that. This is a max function you can use. Or what is the smallest number, right? Or what is the average of all the sales? You can do that as well using an aggregate aggregator function. And when you do that, then usually you want to use a group by clause because you're grouping a group of data together, and then so therefore you have to use a group by clause. And I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And again, the purpose is to calculate over a group of something, right? A group of data. So the groups select the rows into a set of rows by the values of one or more columns. Okay. So one row return for each group, right? So let's just see here. Okay, I think so this one here kind of interesting here. So let's just say I can copy. Hopefully this is the same database. It should still be the same. Let me go in here. Yeah, there's no red squiggly lines. I mean, it still work, right? So if I do this, so it returns, if I choose the sale ID, quantity, and from this sales order, and then where this is in the clause, right? Inside these three groups here. So you have 1, 2, 3 groups. And that's why the group comes into play. So if you do it this way, you see that this order ID, I have 43660, 1, 2, occurs 2 times, and that has that many quantity. 4367 has 1, 2, 3, 4 occurrences, and if you count the total of quantities in here, you have 1 and then 3, 6, right? Have 6 quantities, and then you have 3 occurrences for the 4, 6, 3, 6, 7, 2, and then you have a total of 9 counts in here. Right, so the purpose of the group by is, instead of doing this, I could group this whole thing, these three fields and these 4 fields into their own group. Okay? And then just give the total count for that because it's the same group. If you don't supply the group, then you get something like this. You get a lot of duplicate. It's like, it looks like duplicate data, but you have to manually count them and add them up. Right? So that's why you put the group in there, and then you get a different result. So the next one, I think it shows you, oh, that's the average already. Okay, well, which is a group. So I want to say also one thing. Notice I put a semicolon here. Okay, if you remember from the JavaScript class, same rule applies. Okay, it's not required. You don't have to put it there. But I also recommended, I think because in the next couple years, maybe if not sooner, I think they're going to make it a requirement to have a semicolon for it in SQL Server. Okay, so you should also do that. But for now, it's completely fine. So the group by is, you put again at the bottom here, below the word clause. You can say group by, what are you grouping those by? Okay, for the rule here, this is a rule for the group by. When you use a group by, you have to, I think you have to include all the columns up here in your group by clause. If you use the group by clause. If you don't use it, then of course you don't have to supply. But if you use the group by, then you have to include all the columns in here you select. So if I take this out, for example, Let's see if this will work. You see they have an error, right? I have an error. It says the column sales order quantity is invalid, and the list because it's not contained in the order by clause. Okay, so if you use the order by clause, you have to include every column selected in up here, down here on the group by clause. So now let me run this. Let me copy this. I want to run both of these statements. So the first one here is without the group by. The second is the group. Did it did it do something? Certainly got shorter. From 9 down to 6. So we have 670, yeah, 660, 670, 2, and then 72, 72, 72. 621, 211. Okay. Yeah, I think you have to like put an aggregator in there. Yeah, I didn't include aggregator. Like yeah, the sum or the total count of something. So in this case, we want to count the order quantity, right? Otherwise, in this case, it doesn't make a lot of sense here. Let's see if we can modify this. The sale order quantity. I could just say, give me the count, right? For example, or we. Is it count? Yeah, count of the quantity. Okay, from that. Let's see if that does something. Okay. Well, did some. What if let's see. If I do this. If I do that, it gives me the total count. Let's compare with the other one. See if this matches up. Okay. Does it work this time now? Yeah, it tallies them all, right?
No, it's counting how many orders, not summing.
Oh, not the sum. Yes. Yeah, not the sum. Right. So you could put the sum in there instead of the count. Yeah. So I'm just counting how many orders in there, not the sum. So I could, what if you put a sum in here? Really interesting. Okay, so now it has a sum. Now it tallies the total quantity for each group, and then it will add them up and put that for you. I told you that's a tricky one. So what you see here is the aggregator. Okay, let me just re-clear this. This part here, this is an aggregator. It's a function. It's a built-in function that you can use to get the sum or get a total of something. Now, if I don't include this field in here, if I just do this, then I don't have to use the group by clause. Okay, I think that should be fine. But again, if you do this way, of course, then it doesn't really give you a lot of meaning because it tallies everything in that order quantity and it sums them up, right? If you want to break it down to each own group, then that's what you want to put, okay, based on the sale order. And if you do that, and let's just say if I don't take this, if I don't use this, if I comment this out, okay, And if I run this, you see that have an error. It says you have to use a group by because of this aggregator. Okay, so anytime we use a sum or a maximum or a count or any of those built-in functions, you have to include a group by clause if you have an additional field in the select clause. If you don't have it other than just the sum here, if you don't have any other fields other than what's included inside the sum here, because it's already a part of the aggregator, then you don't have to specify the group by clause. Okay. If you do have other fields in here, then you have to include that a group by clause, and then add every field you have here, which is not part of the quantity inside here, right, or whatever the aggregator is, and you put it outside in the group by clause. So if I add another, like for example, what are other fields? I don't remember which ones, but I have to include that in here. It's just the rule of doing this. Okay, so I can get the sum. I can get like the maximum number of this order quantity and display that to the list. So you can see that the maximum number is actually 6 or 2 or 1 in there. Okay, just to make sure that's correct, if I display this again, the maximum is the biggest number. That's what it is. The biggest number in this group, the 436 is 1, so you get 1. The maximum number in the 4367 is 2, so indeed it's 2. And then the other one group is 6 is the largest, so it grabs the 6 out of that. Okay, so return the maximum number out of that order quantity based on the group of sales order ID. Okay, and there's a minimum 2 and there's an average 2. If you pull an AVG, and that's the average. In this case, it wouldn't. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but you can get an average, a number out of that. So if you take the average, you get the number in there. So that's the group by. And it takes a lot of practice to get used to this one here. As you can see, it can be really tricky. Just remember the rule is that if you have an aggregator in your clause here, and if you have an additional field, you have to use a group by clause. If you don't have other field other than the aggregator itself, then you don't have to include that in here. Okay. If you just want to know like how many you can count how many of the order quantity here, then because I don't include any other fields, it's just going to give me the total count, which is going to be 9 items, right? Okay, so that's here. Some of the aggregate functions in here is built into SQL Server. So the average, the minimum, sum, the standard deviation, variant, and the maximum. Again, these are a lot of these you're probably not going to use, but maybe the average here. The average, the count, and the maximum are probably in the sum, the common ones. Okay, the having here. I will probably skip it for now because this one also gets confusing. Okay, it gets more and more complicated, but maybe next time we'll do the having here. The having is almost like another conditional clause in addition to the where clause. Okay, so because the where clause here filters the results inside the database, okay, before it pulls the data out. After you pull all the data out, and it does another condition, that is the having clause. Okay, so you first you get the where clause, you filter the data, you get those out. I get 10,000 of them. So from that 10,000, that data set, I just want to grab another set out of that, only those data that has, let's say, a maximum of greater than 2. That I shorten that list out. Okay, so basically that's all it does. It's like 2 conditions in the clause. But the whole complete set will look something like this. So select, for example, in this case, I have 3 or 4 fields here from this table. I put a where clause here as restricted, so that all the data are only from these five groups here. Okay, and then I group by the sales ID because only one of this field is in here, right? So all these are inside the aggregators. I don't have to specify that. But the sales order ID is not part of the aggregator, so I have to include it in the group by clause. And then from this total result set, I just want the quantity that has a maximum greater than 2, right? So I shorten that list into that part only.